The weary traveler draws close to the end of the path.
We have never had it so good.
All of this just works.
We are selling tea to China.
You did not have to redeem this, ma'am!
Out with them, forget about them.
Your broadcast is very biased. You've written a lot of ridiculous articles, so I would encourage you to be more journalistic and have more integrity.
Socialism is when the government does stuff.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Longhouse, the weekly show for the sensible centrist. It's great to be back. It's been a great week here in Norway. The weather is fantastic. It's nice and warm, and I'm spending a lot of time outside in the yard and just, going for walks, going for hikes, having a good time. Ludwig Path, how are you doing this week?
Doing fine. I'm also taking the grill pill. Just like
You're taking the grill pill.
I think it's the absolute best way to spend your time right now. So, while I do appreciate the people tuning in for the show, I hope you're grill pilling yourself the rest of the time and not watching anything else politically.
With us, we have a special guest, Lavadur, whom I met at the Karlstage. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm really excited for today's talk since I had a very pleasant time talking with you at the Karlstage Walrus, and I'm pretty sure today is going to be very fine as well.
Hopefully, yeah. Unfortunately, it was far too short. Karlstage was weird because it went by in a flash, and I talked to a lot of people, but at the same time didn't get to talk to as many people for as long as I wanted. So
yeah, I planned on attending that little party on Saturday. I think that was when everyone got drunk and such, right?
Yeah.
I planned on attending it, but unfortunately I was a bit too tired, and I had to still like Balkan work ethic. I didn't even finish my speech, so I literally finished it on Saturday night, and the entire time I was almost kept up awake by the yodeling Germans.
Yeah, that's understandable. I heard the yodeling as well. But I won't name any names, but you weren't the only one who had to work on a speech at the event, so you shouldn't feel bad about that. Nordanon, our trusty moderator, apparently had food poisoning this week, so I hope you're doing better. That sounds awful.
Nordanon, it's nice to see you there. He's actually a very frequent guy on my community posts and such.
Oh, really?
So I actually know him.
That's nice. I never know, which of the people I see in my chat get around, but it makes sense. Just randomly here, we have a Javelin the Fourth says, remember when Google Plus was a thing and you could send messages through YouTube? Why did no one want that? Seems like it would have been useful. It's a very strange thing for you to bring up, because I thought about that just this week. It's something about having to go to other platforms to try and find people is really annoying when you just want to send someone a message if you try to get in touch. Anyway, we have a bit of a packed, or potentially packed, I guess, stream today, so we're probably just going to get straight into it. Those of you who listen to our stream usually will know that we enjoy having something a bit more lightweight at the start of the stream. And this week we're going to talk about, in a couple of days in Norway, there will be our constitutional festivus, our constitutional holiday where we celebrate, the formation of Norway, which we take incredibly seriously here. I've heard that, we make a bigger deal out of this than most countries in Europe. And along with that is a lot of our identity. So every year, and especially, the past 10 years, it's the I guess the debate comes up again and again about what it means to be Norwegian and, you know, what flag are you allowed to fly. But this year I've noticed, and last year as well, there was a lot of talk about our, you know, official garb called the Bunad, which is similar to, if you're familiar with a lot of Eastern European traditional garb, it's somewhat similar. I'm trying not to commit heresy by saying that, but you might recognize some of the stylings, but it's obviously a very Norwegian thing. Not only are they beautiful and they have intricate embroideries, there's also a very strict code in terms of like what colors and embroidery you're allowed to use on this, depending on where it's supposed to be from in Norway. So every place in Norway has its own, you know, expression in this garb, and usually the jewelry, which you can see on this woman here, will be something that is inherited. So like maybe one day she's gotten these from like her mom, and maybe her mom got like the top one from her mom. So this is something that, you know, very much is an inheritance thing and an ancestry thing, because even though you move, let's say you move from, you know, all the way up in the north and you move down to somewhere like Oslo, on the 17th of May you would be wearing the traditional garb of your people back home, to signify that you're from there. So this is an article. It's pretty much it's not an opinion piece, but it's kind of written like an opinion piece. And then we have an actual opinion piece coming up right in a moment. So I'm just going to read these. It's been run through the Google machine, and you guys just pipe up if you have anything you want to comment on.
Yeah, just some commentary for those watching who are not Norwegian, because you commented on the significance of like regionality to these suits, and how you come from a specific municipality. They have their own designs. Like, this stuff is like big business in Norway. I mean, not in the corporate sense, but it's a quite lucrative market if you can make these, because
if you're good at making these, you can make a lot of money. Yeah.
Women will just spend an inordinate amount of money, and it is women in particular. Like, you have the male version of this with the hat and stuff, but it's
I really like
the
male version. I'm going to get one someday. They're just expensive.
It's just not as normal, I think, for a Norwegian man to blow the budget on the bunad, but for a woman to wear something like she's wearing, and they'll pay for expensive jewelry, gold and silver and everything for these garbs. It is just ridiculous the amount of money they're willing to pay for this, and how much status there is in it. What's comparable? You know, I learned that Americans will spend like maybe like a month's salary or sort of 2 months' salary on a wedding ring or something like that. Well, I mean, this is kind of almost sort of a similar thing. Yeah, just cartoonish amounts of money some women are willing to spend on these garbs to get them just right, custom made for the locality with jewelry and everything. So yeah, I'm just throwing that out there.
And that being said as well, you know, very often these things will be, family heirlooms in a sense. My family has smaller bunads, which, you know, my daughter will be wearing when she grows up, and they have like medium-sized bunads from when she becomes a bit older, and then at some point, you know, maybe as like a gift to like your 18th-year-old birthday, you'll get one, right? Something like that, or you'll have one redesigned based on like your grandma's version, right? So it's not always like getting a brand new one, but it's also true, Ludwig, that, as you said, there's a lot of money in this, and there's a lot of pride and a lot of patriotism in a sense, even though it is a bit, commercialized. So I'll just start reading. Your bunad represents the place you come from or have kinship to. It's all about identity, according to Christine Gausta. I guess this is her. She grew up in Tinn municipality in Telemark. From the time she was a child, it was decided that she would receive the Tinn bunad for her as her graduation gift. So there you see, that's a very common thing. The vest, which is this green part, she has inherited from her grandmother, and the silver she got from her baptism. The knife is one that was made for her by her dad. I can't see that she has a knife on her. I have a Bunad's knife that's ready for the day I get mine. Every time I put on my Bunad, I think about my home. I'm going to be proud about it, she says. But when she moved to Oslo, she noticed that there were surprisingly many that were wearing the belt stack, which is like part of it, or other pieces of the Telemark Bunads in the streets on the national holiday. Are there really that many people from my municipality here, she thought. In the recent years, something has also happened on social media. Every May time, it crawls with the web crawls with is overflowing, I guess, with TikTok videos of people in the Telemark belt stack, which is the signature, I think, girder. I think is the word here. But when I read the comments on the videos, it comes to light that the people have no connection to my municipality at all. They come from completely different places, such as Bærum, and have only chosen Telemark because they think it's the nicest one. These justifications have caused the Telemark-born woman to react. Why do you use our Bunad when you're not from our region or have any connection to the place, she asks on a TikTok video this week. And this video currently has 450,000 views and 1,500 comments, which is pretty good for just a Norwegian-specific TikTok. It basically means it went viral. Traditions are being erased. I think you should choose a Bunad that has something to do with your identity. If you do not like the Bunad from your home region, you can rather have the backbone to look up Bunads from the place your grandparents are from. I guess that explains about the video. When I've thought about which Bunad I'm going to get in the future, that's been something that I wanted to think about, because on my father's side, my grandmother and grandfather are from somewhere else, and my dad grew up somewhere else in Norway. So I was thinking, like, do I want the Bunad from their traditional home, because in a sense that's where my family roots are, or should I have a Bunad that reflects where I grew up and was born? And I think I landed on the one that's from where I'm personally from. I think that's fine. Someone will call you the Bunad police if you have opinions about this, asked the journalist, and she says, I don't see myself as a police. For example, I don't care how people style their Bunad or whether they have the proper shirts on or not. I'm only concerned with belonging. There's something about traditions being erased. She emphasizes that she will not refuse people to buy a Bunad from Telemark, but she believes that many young people today are influenced by what they see on social media. And among celebrities and influencers, this type of clothing is particularly popular, she says. So here are some examples of these kinds of Bunads. Ellen Overland, production manager at Heimen Husflid in Oslo, can tell the paper that they now sell more than twice as many of these types than just a few years ago. She's not so concerned about whether you belong to the area that the Bunad is from or not. Well, she's a merchant, so of course she isn't. We do not ask for family trees when customer orders a Bunad with us, but many willingly talk about kinship and about the Bunad traditions they have in their family. Luddigpath, do you believe that, requiring documented family trees should be a part of ordering a Bunad? It might actually be like something that could be enforced.
You could enforce that. I think you would just blow up the industry at that point.
Probably, yeah.
I think social policing is probably enough. Otherwise, this would have to just be a state venture or something.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would bother to open a shop doing this if you had to get the 23andMe from these people. But I can see the sort of my culture is not your costume argument.
I could see this happening, regardless of the reason. Let's see here. This is, I'm not sure. Oh, they're still talking to the merchant. She believes that the belt stack has become popular because it has so much freedom of choice when it comes to colors, patterns, ribbons, and aprons for the fabric itself, and not least the chip woven belt. The materials you choose for life, blah, blah, blah. It's about showing belonging and traditions in individual families. For others, it's a clear status symbol, and it's probably so in some environments that it's important who sewn the Bunad and what it cost when they did it. So I guess this is becoming a luxury item, a statement thing now, maybe. Most people choose a Bunad that they are associated with, says Camilla Rossing, who is head of the Norwegian Institute for Bunad and Folk Costumes, which is apparently an institute that we have. Learn something new every day. It is primarily in eastern Norway that we see few choose bunad from a few choose a bunad from another place. When you put on the bunad, you dress into a community, and the bunad becomes a symbol of where you belong. So that's interesting that, you know, everywhere else in the country outside of, I guess, Oslo, it seems like people are, you know, accepting or less accepting or just seeking, you know, to represent their region more, which I guess make sense. Here's a poll about like what should be the primary reason for people to choose a bunad, and the winner is that it should represent the place your family is from. Number 2 is it should represent the place where you grew up. And if I vote on this poll, what do you think should be the decisive choice? And I place, like, say, the place the family comes from, it's on a 63% poll. That's 2,000 people voting. So this is kind of just to show the audience here that this is important. And then we're going to get into this one real fast.
This is a chronicle in the private chat. From like a shop, I guess, just to show people that I wasn't kidding. So you have some designs. At least you could show them the bunads for men as well.
Sure.
Because usually there's a.
I feel like you chose one of these on purpose, but
I did one of them, yeah. But a very ethnically Norwegian guy.
You're rage baiting on one of these, yeah.
A little, yeah, slot posting live.
Yeah. So this is one of them. This is about, for a man, this is about 55,000 kroner, which is, you can just divide by 10, so about 5,000 euros, 5,500 euros. And you get this
$5,000, $5K for this.
Yeah. Now, you had something else as well. I'm gonna give you the rage bait.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Oh yes, very good.
Here's a different version.
Oslo style.
This is only 3,000. But this is a more modern bunad. This is from 1997, and it's made as sort of like an Oslo specific one. So it's not necessarily one that belongs to a region. So it's a bit of a newer one. So let's cover.
I mean, in my opinion, the whole bunad thing is actually really interesting. Like, I believe it is a beautiful Norwegian tradition. I have to be honest, I didn't really know that much about Norwegian culture before coming here. So this bunad and how there are like specific bunads for like each, place in Norway. It's actually very beautiful. Like if your family comes from a place, or if you are living in a specific region, you all have these distinct and beautiful bunads. And I honestly think this is a beautiful Norwegian tradition. And I'm happy to hear, like, when you cited that saleswoman, that the sales have only gone up. I mean, honestly, to me, that's just a good sign that Norwegians are actually remembering their heritage and tradition.
I mean, and specifically in this one, it's very important to us. Like, I mean, you can say there's some sort of like popularity consumerism going on here, maybe among young girls, but it is born out of like a feeling of, I want to represent where my family is from, right?
I think it's a nice intersection when you have both high status and nationalism, merged into one custom. Isn't that kind of what you want, for these things to actually be high status? And it's
very nice. I mean, I don't want to. This is like a random photo on Wikipedia, so I'm sorry if like we're broadcasting random girls from 2001 here, but I used this for the thumbnail. But it's very beautiful when you see women, and they're all wearing different ones, and you can, if you're good, you can tell where they're from. It's very nice. It's a very nice sort of like, how do you say, like, it's a nice thing to see on the street, right? During celebrations. So it's pleasing. What is Norwegian enough for May 17th, which is the constitutional day? If we acquire a culture we are not entitled to, is the party suit, the festivus dress, important for integration? So on May 17th, a few years ago, because this has been the thing that's been propping up, is that instead of a bunad, people are doing what you would call like a celebration dress, right? Which is like the legally distinct name for a bunad. It's just like, it looks like it, but it's not, because a bunad has very specific craftsman sort of I guess details that need to be produced in a very specific way for it to be called a bunad. So if you have something that looks like a bunad but isn't, you have to call it, something that's legally distinct. And what a lot of people call it is just like a celebration dress. On May 17th, a few years ago, I walked out the door wearing a homemade celebration dress. I felt pride and joy, but also turmoil. What would people say? How would they react? The dress was made out of curtains, fabric I brought home from an exchange stay in Guatemala, and other textiles my mom had lying around. I sewed it with her in hopes of celebrating the day in a way that both mirrored who I am, and at the same time showed respect for the Norwegian tradition. It was my way of saying I belong here too. I mean, you're legally allowed to do it, but if you're making this article because you're sad that people aren't treating this as a bunad, right? Otherwise, she wouldn't be writing this, and we've not even started, is my assumption. This year, too, the bunad debate has flared up ahead of May 17th. Sandra Ling criticizes that to wear shirts from their own clothing brand with something. In addition, a TikTok video of Liv carrying Shihiluka in a Congolese-inspired celebration dress had got a lot of attention. Fortunately, most of it was positive. Such reactions show that interest in more diverse expression is growing, but that the limits of what is accepted are still up for discussion. Well, I think that should be a discussion, because at some point, I mean, because it is art, right? It's not like I said there is some sort of technical, craftsman things you can say what is a bunad and not, but at some point it's just artistic, right? It's either it's a bunad or it's not, and the only way you can sort of decide that is by gut feeling. And patriotism, I suppose. I came to Norway from Afghanistan as a child and grew up in southern Norway in a local environment where the majority was ethnic Norwegian, and it was this culture that characterized me the most in my upbringing. Like many children and young people, I wanted to fit in, and belonging was often about having the proper things, the clothes, the brands, the symbols that made one slip into the crowd. When my friends got the bunad for their confirmation, I was without one, not because I didn't want it, but because my family had neither tradition nor the finances to prioritize it. Later, when I had the opportunity to buy a bunad, again, people talk about finances, but in my experience, a lot of times you're getting, parts of the bunad inherited or refitted. So the finances are being it's not like everyone is buying a new one all the time. They're buying parts of it. Later, when I had the opportunity to buy a bunad myself, I found that one suit from one place in Norway could not embrace my entire identity. Well, I feel like that kind of just invalidates the thing you say here, right?
Yeah.
Like, why say this if you can't wear a bunad and feel like you belong somewhere?
Like if you actually, as she said, she grew up in southern Norway in that region, then obviously, and she herself says there that she wanted to fit in, and this characterizes her entire childhood, then why not just get a bunad for that region? Why?
Yeah, it's very simple. Yeah.
Because she actually doesn't feel like she really does belong. I think that's the most logical explanation.
For many who have not grown up with these traditions, it may feel wrong to put it on. It's like we're acquiring a culture that we're not fully entitled to. Well, in a certain sense, but it's also a way, it kind of goes both ways. I saw one comment on these, one of these articles that have been going around of a woman who was from some Eastern European country or something, and she said like, but my husband's mom gifted me her bunad, after we had been married for like 10 years or something. Am I not allowed to wear it? And my thought is, well, technically, that's, your husband's family telling you that, yes, you're actually, now you are allowed to wear it. We are gifting this inheritance, this, ancestry to you as well. And we're acknowledging you as part of the family now. And I think it's the opposite, right? It's not like it's a two-way street. Like you have to show the effort by wearing the costume, and then we will decide whether or not you're entitled to it. You can't just decide that, unfortunately. And yes, it's hard, but I mean, it's hard being an immigrant. That's just the way it is. The Bunad is a strong identity marker, and therefore it is so important that more people get the opportunity to recognize themselves in national symbols. The celebration costume or dress became my alternative. It's a garment that deals with belonging, reuse, personal roots, and cultural diversity. Belonging to is not only about language and place of residence, but also about seeing yourself in the things around yourself and around you, as the celebration dress on the national holiday. More expression means no less respect for tradition, but more inclusion. Well, that's the weird thing, because I don't feel like there is a need for inclusion in this, because I feel the existing traditional garb is inclusive enough. Like if you feel entitled to wear it, then you are entitled to wear it. And if not, you're gonna get comments, right? Maybe I'm being weird, Luddick.
No, I think it's a sound thing. It's well, I mean, it's difficult when people are coming to this. I wish I had some kind of like standard based, like what's the base to take here, you know? But I've never been very deep into Bunad culture myself.
Yeah.
I had one, but I mean, like the male one is just not as high status as the female one. I've always seen it as kind of a female coded thing, even though we're pitching it here as like this nationalist thing, and it certainly has a lot of that to it, but it's always been very sort of female coded in my mind.
Well, I'm saving up to get one day. I'm gonna get one of these because I'm from the south, so this is the male version of the southern one, and I think this is a pretty nice one for the men. I'm probably not gonna get a hat because I don't look good in hats, but. Yeah.
I thought the hat was the coolest part. I mean, some of them, like they have the top hats
maybe I'll get
saturated as well.
We'll see. Yeah. All right. We spent a bit more time on this than I wanted, but it's one of those things where this crops up every year. But I don't know. It seems to be like evergreen. Like nothing can knock the Bunad down really. It's actually been more of like I would say like the conservatives, quote unquote, have lost more ground on like flags than they have on Bunad, in that, you're allowed to, it should be allowed to wave other flags than Norwegian flags on our constitutional day. Before we go ahead, we have a $5 donation from Florida Man, staple of this channel, who says, I bless this, Florida Man. Thank you. Always appreciated around here. So,
that actually reminds me, since you brought up Florida Man, do you guys know about the Florida Man Challenge?
What is the Florida Man Challenge?
Basically, you Google your birthday, like the date of your birth, like let's say the month and day where you were born, and then after that you just type Florida Man and see what Florida Man did on your birthday.
Let's see what Florida Man. It's nothing for me, unfortunately.
I
have it. No, a Florida Man delivered last year. Florida Man faces charges in Village's black market erectile dysfunction drug case. A man from the Villages is facing a year in prison after allegedly stockpiling erectile dysfunction medications and is accused of planning to distribute them. There you go. That's me.
You got car theft, basically, Grand Theft Auto. It wasn't as cool as yours.
And then, for example, mine is Florida Man accused of shooting 3 people after trying to date his daughter.
That's a classic. Yeah, that's much more on brand. But yeah, I called this stream, cultural exchange, and I wanted to include, because Lavadar, you approached me and you said, one thing you maybe wanted to talk about was jihad and jihadism, and I wanted to include that in the title or in the thumbnail, but YouTube
It will
really
get
doesn't
shadow
like
banned.
that. Yeah, so even the thumbnail got kind of nuked before it was, and it was a very small like part of the thumbnail was some jihadis, but no. So please remember what platform we're on, and the floor is yours, I suppose.
All right. So this is a topic I have been researching for quite a while now, specifically the question of, okay, what are the actual like origins of like jihadism? Like, what is the actual history and origin behind the idea? Like, how did this idea develop to the point we know it today? And I feel like this specific question today, well, for example, in the mainstream, whenever it is discussed, it is done in a very surface level, like not exactly, it doesn't really answer the questions. Like, for example, from the Muslim side, whenever, people bring those things up, they always go, oh, they're like mentally ill, they don't know true Islam and such, but they don't exactly explain, okay, where did these things come from, how did they come about, and how can we identify it more. Like, it's always like extremely vague a bit, and this of course has, and because of the vagueness of it, because no one has really been able to really articulate and explain how it came about, it pretty much led to a lot of people, quote unquote, shooting in the dark to find, okay, who is exactly causing this whole thing. And I've actually, and this topic has been interesting me for quite a while now, so I started researching it more. And there are actually a lot of good resources, both I've actually read resources both in English and in Arabic in regards to those specific developments. And in regards to answer the question, okay, what is, like, where exactly did this modern ideology, or as I like to call it, Salafi jihadism, where did it originate from, and what is the history behind it? So it is made up of pretty much, it's in the name, like, of the two components. You have Salafism, and then of course you have jihadism. It is made up of these two points. So in regards to the very first part, Salafism. Now, this is a term that usually gets thrown around a bit. It's also kind of a buzzword where people throw it around, but they don't actually know what it exactly means and such. So I will try to not make this too long, since there is a lot to cover. But basically, this thing goes back to, like, from the very beginning of Islam, since the establishment of the Rashidun Caliphate, where you basically had this conflict, which you also had in Christianity, in regards to a literalist interpretation of Scripture, or a more reason-centered interpretation of Scripture. So in regards to this, you had so you had pretty much like three schools of thought developing. You had the Maturidis, the Asharites, and of course you had the Atharis. Now, the Atharis were the more literalistic people who interpret the Quran and the whole Islamic tradition, like, from a very literalist perspective. Then you of course had the Asharis, which are more who try to find more of a balance between reason and, like, literal interpretation of Scripture. Like, as long as reason does not go against Scripture, then it should be freely used. Then you had the Maturidis, who are a bit more on the reason side. Like, for example, they like to claim that humans are able to um, find out what is right or wrong, or what is moral or not, simply through reason alone, that morality does not need divine revelation to be known. And these three sides, like, throughout the medieval Islamic times, have been kind of going at each other. Now, the Maturidis often were closely allied with the Asharis, and these two have actually dominated a lot of the government positions and a lot of the theology within the Islamic world, specifically during the Islamic Golden Age, because
Right.
of their focus on reason and such. They saw having how to say, searching for knowledge, searching for answers, asking questions. They did not see it as only beneficial, but literally commanded by God, because one of the very first things in the Quran that is ordered, it's read. So they saw it basically as a divine command to go out and pretty much learn and find out much about the world that you have. So that is why they focused a lot on
So is this the least, to use a Drukpa Kunliism, is this the least jinn-brained branch of Islam?
pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's why they focused a lot on ancient Greek, on translating ancient Greek texts and studying ancient Greek philosophy and all these parts. That's why they actually managed to develop a kind of system of like analysis called Neoplatonism. And of course, then you had the Atharis, on the other hand, who of course, you had them with their more literal interpretation of scripture and the Quran. For example, a very common debate today that is still had between the more reason side and the more literalists is, for example, in the Quran, whether God has human body parts. Like in the Quran, it is said where God says, on my right hand. Now, of course, the more people who are more reason centered say, well, this is, this is hyperbole. So like it's not true, like a metaphorical hand, while the more literalists are like, no, this is an actual hand. He means it literally. He has an actual hand. And so this kind of discourse has been dominating that part of the Islamic world. And then after the fall of Baghdad and pretty much the destruction of the Baghdad House of Wisdom, the governments of the Islamic world started leaning more into the Atharis, because the Atharis were like, so see what happened here. This is basically God telling us that we have focused too much on this science, too much on this thinking, and he wants us to go back. Like the attack by the Mongols was basically a divine punishment for that, since the Atharis were also against the concept of kalam, which is basically speculative theology. Like when Asharis and Maturidis would debate, they will go, okay, but what does this literally mean? Like, for example, you have a command or something else there, and they basically try to find what is the deeper meaning of it. Like, what does this exactly mean? And the authorities are like, don't think about it. Don't try to think about it. If it says right there, then just don't think about it. Just do not think about it at all. And basically, after that, the authorities...
When you say not think about it, not even like, okay, what does that mean for me? Like, don't even consider it as like, don't even act on this information?
Yeah, but basically, it's like if God says, like, let's say, do not get, for example, do not. Okay, let's take halal slaughter as an example. So of course, halal slaughter has always been a pretty much controversial topic due to, due to how the fate of the animals by having their throat slit. And the whole logic behind halal has been that the animals should be slaughtered in like the most merciful and quickest way possible. Now, of course, back then in like the medieval era, where people still use primitive tools like sharp knives, this was pretty much the most humane way of killing these animals, like a very quick slice to the throat, and that was it. So you have the Maturidis and the Asharis who are like, okay, so the reason why halal slaughter exists, why God commanded us to slaughter animals in this way, is because it's in order for us to kill the animals more humanely and quickly so they don't feel pain. So then when you're confronted with things like, let's say, the modern invention of stunning the animals, they actually approached this issue and basically said, if we now have a tool that actually kills the animals even more humanely than before, then we should utilize it. This is why, for example, a lot of more modern halal slaughter methods, like, for example, in the Balkans and in Turkey, what they do is they actually stun the animal beforehand, like they put it unconscious, and then they slit its throat so that it's not even aware that it's being killed. So in essence, according to them, as long as the animal is not killed by the stun effect and then is slaughtered in a normal way, then it is still halal and it is permissible. So they saw this so stunning, they saw as a modern invention that could, ease more of the pain of the animal, since that is the whole logic behind halal, for it to be humane to the animal. So then
they see it as a continuation of the same sort of the spirit of the law, in a sense.
Pretty much. And then you have the Atharis, on the other hand. Their argument is literally, okay, stunning, that did not exist back then. Don't try to innovate. Just slaughter like it always has. Do not try to think about it. Just slaughter it like it always has. So that's because one thing Muslims kind of pride themselves in is the fact that they see their religion as, not being, corrupted by man. Like they believe, okay, God sent down his final words and we should not corrupt it. We should stick to it, and that is it. So that's why the topic of innovations or bid'ah is actually a very controversial topic in the Islamic world, because there are debates of, okay, is all innovation a bad thing, or are there specific innovations that are bad? For example, you have what was it called again? You have the celebrations of, for example, of the Prophet Muhammad's birthday, which a lot of Muslims, celebrate and, organize feasts and such on that day, while a lot of the more literalists and Atharis are like, no, do not celebrate it. That is an innovation. That is a bid'ah. Do not celebrate it. So that's always where this kind of, debate arises when in regards to innovation.
Can I just shoot in a question here, Lavender? Because most of my knowledge on this topic is just sort of a black hole, so I have to just pull on a couple of threads, a few pieces of information that I have here and there, and then some of it. This is something I think I remember from Bertrand Russell in the book, The History of Western Philosophy. But he talks about it's like a Muslim thinker whose name is Al-Jasali or something, and he wrote a book that's called The Incoherence of Philosophers, where he just argued that all philosophy is essentially bullshit. It's all Allah. And I think where does that guy fit in? Is that like the Asherite or something like this?
That probably because Atharis are also known for their dislike of philosophy for that exact way, because they believe it leads to people, thinking too deep about things and things that don't really matter. So they are not only against speculative theology, but also about philosophy, because if God has already revealed what is the meaning of life and what to do, then why should we question the world then? What is the point of it? So then from the Atharis developed Salafism, which is actually more of a modern invention. And how do I say, the Salafis are basically, now not all Atharis are really radical in these things, but I would say Salafism is a pretty radical radical deviation from the Athari thought. They believe that the modern Islamic world has become completely corrupted, and they believe that the only way to save it is by pretty much going back to the way the original Muslims lived and how they thought. So basically, it's pretty much reactionary in that sense, is that in order to save the Islamic world, they have to bring everything back to how it was in 7th century Arabia. That is why...
So I can't say his name, but someone says, all of this sounds like we're going to get Islam 2.0, but that sounds like Salafism, right?
Pretty much. So Salafism is interesting because...
Nope. I think we lost Lavender there for a second.
I thought it was just my internet that was struggling, but I think it's a general problem. I've been falling in and out a little bit myself, so...
Okay. No, I'm hearing you fine. I think Lavender is... they got to him. He's been saying a lot of the bad words.
The Salafist network, they shut them down. The Luddites, they blew up the fiber cables.
Anyway, while we wait for him to get back, we can bring up some of the chats that have been going on while we were going. Let's see here. Ultra Radical Censor says Islam try not be occasionalist, challenge impossible. I guess that's in reference to the conservatives. Let's see here. Is there anything else? Oh, there, we lost him finally. He's probably going to be back in a moment. Let's see if there's been any more fun posts happening in the chat. Yisti Eunuch, for a while, quite a while ago, said, just popping in to say howdy, leaving for the annual OGC conference. Have a blessed week, friends. Well, I hope you're having a good time at the Old Glory Club conference, even though you probably left by now. So, while we wait, maybe we can bring up this clip here, because I saw this earlier. Oh, never mind, we have him back. He's returned.
Yeah, the Salafi network sent its regards. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry,
German internet moment.
Exactly, yeah. I don't remember where you were at.
I actually remember. So this is when I actually started with, okay, I know where I left off. So then came Salafism, which is more of which is actually modernist like way of interpretation, as they deviate from the authorities, that they are much more radical in that regard because they are reactionary to the fullest extent, is that they believe the Islamic world has been completely corrupted, and the only way to save this is by pretty much living and bringing back like the whole lifestyle and culture of like 7th century Arabia and how the original Muslims lived. And because of that, Salafis have this, how do I explain it? This savior sect mindset, like this mentality is that they believe they are the savior sect, like they are gonna save the religion. We are the chosen ones who will bring people out of the darkness and such. And for that reason, they are a lot more arrogant in their way and pretty much have this thought of, okay, either you are with me or you are against me mentality, because again, they believe themselves to be some kind of chosen sect to pretty much bring people into the light and such. And
it's echoing, well, someone said it, Protestant Reformation stuff, like early German Protestant Reformation had a lot of this. I mean, even communism has this with international revolution people, right?
And that's why I would say the best comparison you can make between Salafists and those on the Christian side is with the Protestant Puritans that came to America. Like, I believe it is a very accurate comparison between them. So pretty much the Salafis are the Protestant Puritans of the Islamic world, but
more
unfortunately
violent.
they have not really, died out like the Puritans have. And so then you have the other side, like the more revolutionary, this actually more violent side to it, which is jihadism. Now, this is the thing that also originates actually during the very first caliphate. You had a faction called the Kharijites. They were basically a break off from like the mainstream Islamic caliphate. Like you had Ali, who was I'm pretty sure he was the stepson of the Prophet Muhammad, who actually was he was the third caliph, and the Kharijites actually rose up around his time. And they are basically, so one thing they're really known for is their very, how do I say, liberal interpretation and use of takfir. Now, if you don't know what takfir is, it's basically Muslim version of excommunication. You basically claim that, for people that are not Muslims. That's why, for example, they, how do I say, they pretty much, they argue that every major sin automatically constituted kufr, which is disbelief, meaning that if someone does a major sin or something, they are automatically declared disbelievers and such. And that's why they unironically takfired pretty much all the notable companions of the Prophet Muhammad, and some historical accounts even say all of them. They are actually the ones who killed the Caliph Ali and the stepson of the Prophet Muhammad. They actually killed him and assassinated him. And for example, when they were waging war against the caliphate, they would also, so just like in Christianity, Islam also has eye for an eye. And now the Kharijites, they have taken this eye to an eye to a very, very extreme extent, to the point where it basically also involves people who are not involved in an incident. Like, for example, if a guy comes and kills your sister, then obviously it will be foolish and immoral to also kill that guy's sister because she is a third party. She is not involved in any way. But the Kharijites pretty much abide by that logic. That's why sometimes they massacred entire towns and villages of Muslims if they reaffirmed their allegiance to the Caliphate and Ali. And then, and a lot of the, and that's why, for example, then you have the more modern neo-Kharijites that emerged during the 19th century and early 20th century. One of the most notable ones, which almost no one ever heard about, who I would say is the brainchild, like the father of modern jihadism, the Egyptian scholar Sayyid Qutb, who was executed by the Egyptian government in like I think the mid 1960s. He basically wrote a lot of books on this topic, and he also pretty much claimed, just like the Salafis, that 90% of the entire Islamic world they were full of disbelievers. Like 90% of the Muslims are not even Muslims anymore, and we need to wage this holy war in order to, bring back the glory of Islam and such. And that's actually where this more revolutionary side of Salafism comes from. So to understand modern jihadism, it is basically a combination of the very literal-minded Salafis with the revolutionary zeal of the Kharijites and of the thoughts of Sayyid Qutb. And that's how you basically get Salafi jihadism, because a lot of people also don't mention is that they also very frequently target other Muslims as well, notably the Sufis, who are a much more esoteric, spiritual side of Islam, who focus much more on spirituality. Like a few years ago in Egypt, the jihadis actually went into a mosque full of Sufis and they killed around 200 people. And they pretty much massacred everyone. And because, again, that's exactly the zeal of, Sayyid Qutb, is that they don't even see these people as Muslims. So in order to, they need to be exterminated in order to bring about this purity of Islam. So jihadism
this is when you hear like, someone's translated the Quran or some of the hadiths or whatever, and it says like, well, you can lie and harm the non-believer. That's the takfir you're talking about, right? So they're essentially
that is actually I'm pretty sure you are talking about taqiyya when it comes to lying and such.
Maybe I'm conflating them. Yeah.
Like this one is kind of stupid because taqiyya is basically this thing where like every Muslim you encounter is basically a liar, and he is just lying to you and trying to cozy up to you to, lead about the day when he stabs you in the back and, kills you and your whole family. Basically, according to taqiyya logic, the only reason I am here talking to you and such is so I can earn your trust. So then when the day comes, I can stab you in the back and kill your whole family. Like, taqiyya wasn't even used in this regard. Like, it was mainly used by the Shias, more of as a defensive mechanism where, like, conceal your intentions. Like, if someone, like the Shias were kind of persecuted, so when someone walked up to them and told them, hey, are you a Shia? They could, of course, say, no, I'm not. I'm a Sunni or Christian or something else, in order to basically, protect themselves from persecution. It's basically conceal your true intentions and your religious beliefs in order to, under threat of execution or persecution. That's basically what taqiyya was. And I have basically no idea how it was basically translated into this thing and how people interpret it today.
I think that's the counter jihad populist slop, honestly.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to do like Muslim Defense Force, but I wanted to just zoom out a little bit for the people who maybe get a little bit lost in the weeds of this. So, like the Salafists are Shia, right? Just correct me if
they're
I'm wrong
not.
here.
No, they're
Sunni,
Sunni.
I think.
They're Sunni.
The Salafis hate the Shias.
Am I missing them? So okay, but which countries would you say that Salafism has the strongest presence?
I would most definitely the Arabian Gulf, countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain. And this is also another very interesting topic to think about, is that now obviously we are seeing much more of a stronger presence of Salafism across the entire world, like it is spreading. And one of the reasons why now, of course, counter jihad slop accounts will say, oh, this is some inevitable development and such organic. But actually the reason is that you can actually pinpoint the exact moment Salafism started rapidly spreading across the entire world, when that little corner of Arabia founded oil. It's very coincidental because, as we know, the Gulf countries basically have so much money to burn. Like they burn money annually. So because they have this, savior sect mindset, they believe they need to spread their glory across every corner of the Islamic world. So they finance mosques, and sometimes, for example, they also can call in a few favors, like, okay, we'll renovate this for you or assist you financially, but in turn, you have to, adjust some of your teachings to fit in with our visions. There is actually a very interesting book on this topic called Wahhabism and the World, Understanding Saudi Arabia's Global Influence on Islam by Peter Mandeville. And he says that, and in the book it is documented that since Saudi Arabia found oil, the total amount Saudi Arabia spent on propagating Salafism across the entire world through investments or donations totals around $70 billion. That is why, and it also pretty much led to the deaths and I would say even the deterioration of a lot of more local Muslim cultures. Like, okay, for example, in Norway, if you had a like let's say a Muslim community that is more adjacent to Norway, like ethnic Norwegians and more culturally Norwegian, and then you have, and because they, and let's say the community is struggling a bit, so then the Saudis come in and go, hey, I see you are struggling a bit, so how about this? I will financially assist you, but again, in return, you have to adjust a few of your teachings and a lot of things in order to get this stuff. And because a lot of the local, Muslim communities that have formed, like they were very diverse, they pretty much are. They literally cannot compete with that. They cannot compete with the Gulf money offered by countries like Saudi Arabia. So they are slowly going extinct, and are being replaced by this global, how do I say, homogenic version of Salafism, where basically everything is the same if you go around. Like obviously, again, you had a very diverse culture of Muslims, sometimes with their own sects and beliefs, and now that is all being completely rooted out and replaced by a globalist, uniform Salafist culture, exactly because the Gulf countries have just so much money to burn.
Interesting. So you would say they are the source of Salafism in the modern world, basically.
Basically, because I believe that if the Gulf countries never found oil, I'm pretty sure that Salafism would have more or less stayed like as more of a specific sect adjacent to the Arabian Peninsula rather than something completely international.
Nordan says global homo Islam. No way.
I mean, have you seen those kids LARPing?
I
mean, have you seen those kids LARPing, those Islamist kids on Twitter LARPing like, oh, we are coming, the caliphate established, and then you have like a giant caliphate spanning Europe to like Malaysia or something. That's basically what they're asking for.
So,
Well,
sorry,
yeah, I
did
mean,
you have a
this,
follow-up, Bloody Panther?
Yeah. I mean, people have been joking about this Qatari influence stuff, but it's real, right? It's not an actual joke. They're buying the president of the US currently, so it actually does seem to
APAC
work.
has got competition.
Yeah, they're being beaten. Actually, they seem to have a lot deeper pockets than we thought. I just linked this because this is a picture of the Blue Mosque in Oslo, right? And this is, I also suspect this is like all Saudi money or Qatari or whatever, UAE money paying for this stuff. It's not like just local collections from the kebab shops. to build this kind of elaborate.
This has to be
ornaments.
like one of the few actual like mosques, like not just like they're doing it in a different building kind of thing. I've never seen this in Norway. I didn't even know we had any like these.
Well, usually if you drive through Oslo or something on the way to Sweden, you can see this one, at least the towers.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I don't know if a building like this exists anywhere else in Norway other than Oslo, right?
No,
Because usually
I'd
a
have to look
mosque in
that up.
Norway is just like a random community center that they turned into a mosque, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they buy some kind of elaborate orbs and what do you call like these decorations? This kind of twisting, turning, like the typical these sort of fractal Islamic things that they just
you
put
mean the
on the
little
walls.
towers?
Yep. Well,
Yeah, they are called the minarets.
It is things like that. They will get at least on the community center and just put in some decorations in there. But the Blue Mosque in Oslo is like a real, elaborate construction.
So, before we zoomed out, you were talking about the difference between the Salafi and this sort of how they became the jihadists. I'm not sure if we completed that journey. Because it seems like the UAE stuff you're talking about now, that's not necessarily when people say jihadists now, we usually think about like revolutionaries with rocket launchers, right?
Well, that's the thing because as I like to say, so obviously not all Salafis are jihadis, but all jihadis are Salafists. So
Right.
so that's why I don't say so that's why I don't say jihadism is Salafism. That's why I say it is a combination of Salafism and these revolutionary tactics and ideas of like the Kharijites inside Qutb, like when you mix those together. But like on its own, Salafism is not like inherently, how do I say, bad. Again, it's just another more literalist and traditional interpretation of Islam and scripture. But when it is combined with that revolutionary zeal, that is where the problems start.
Yeah. But I mean, is there any way for like Western people and governments to sort of practically separate this?
Well, for example, now I will give an idea from the country I grew up in, Bosnia. So we have a Islamic community that pretty much oversees everything from like the construction of mosques to like the training of imams and such, and the Bosniaks practice a much more rationalist perspective of Islam. The Hanafi school of thought, who are most of the time Maturidis, and of course there has been some Saudi money flowing in with such, but because the Islamic community, which is pretty much, I'd say, acts as a sort of a government ministry for religion, is that they basically like whenever Saudi money comes in, they actually supervise the process of like, okay, we need to make sure these Saudis are just donating money for construction and renovation and not asking for any favors. So that's why if you want to be an imam in Bosnia, you can't come from like Saudi Arabia. You have to be trained in Bosnia with like the with the Hanafi school of thought. So they supervise the whole imam training process. And I actually remember my imam pretty much when I was a kid, when I basically went to Muslim Sunday school, he always told us like, do not go on websites and in internet and search for answers there, because you may as well accidentally stumble across these Salafi perspectives. So if you have any questions, just ask us. Do not go on the internet and search this stuff, because
Right.
another problem is because again, the Salafis, they view themselves as the true Muslims, the pure, the purest form of Islam. That's why you almost never hear them calling themselves. That's why I never hear them calling themselves Salafi. They will just say, "Oh, they are Muslim." So this makes it sometimes hard to identify. For example, you have the actually the most famous, Islamic Q&A website on the internet, Islam Q&A. That whole place, now people don't realize it on the surface, but that place is literally a giant battleground between different sects, and you can actually identify them because, for example, if you are now the Maturidis and the more rationalists are like, okay, this is a rationalist perspective on this matter, such and such. But like the Salafis, they will never say, okay, this is the Salafist perspective on the matter. They will say this is the Muslim objective stance on the matter. So they will say, okay, this is the true one. So that's for example, if a Protestant wants to, I don't know, search for things on the internet about Christianity, and they stumble upon a Catholic website, but doesn't call itself Catholic, more like, like Christianity or something, like takes a general Christian identity, and like they answer questions from this, quote unquote, objective Christian way. So that Protestant will then unintentionally and unknowingly buy into Catholic ideas without realizing they are Catholic. So that's kind of what's also going on there, is that it's sometimes hard to like identify them because they don't go around saying, oh, we are Salafis. They will just say we are just, Muslims and such. But the very best way, it's pretty much like a litmus test, is that if you want to see whether someone is a Salafi, ask him about Mawlid. That is the celebration of the Prophet Muhammad's birthday. And I already told you that is kind of a controversial topic. And because they are literalists and they are staunchly against any form of innovation. So if you ask them about Mawlid, and if they say, no, it's haram, we should not do it, it's an innovation, you can be like 90% sure they are Salafis.
Right. I mean, maybe I'm being a bit reductionist here, but it sounds like, the best defense against Islamic subversion is Islam.
Can you elaborate more on that?
No, when you said that, Albania or your community has, stood firm against Salafism because you already have strong Islam, right?
Mm.
But maybe I'm just saying that, having a religion is the way to go.
And that's why, for example, Salafism is much more prominent in the West. Is because you have other Islamic countries like Malaysia and Indonesia. They also have those exact same things where they have government ministries overseeing this stuff, and any Salafis are pretty much going to have to propagate from like a little enclave and such. But Western Europe, the West, does not have these things, and because there is absolutely no restriction, and with pretty much the backing of Gulf money, they are able to propagate themselves and establish firm positions pretty much everywhere. And pretty much beating out all, and also another reason why Salafism is so appealing is because I think we already talked on the Karlstage a lot about the stuff, emotions versus reason, and how emotions are so much more stronger. Now, the Salafis, if you ever looked at those like Islamist speeches and such, they are very rhetorical. Like they know how to sway a crowd with like powerful language, speeches and such, and they are much more emotional in that regard, and that's why they are able to attract a lot of these followers. Meanwhile, the more rationalists and the Sufis, they are pretty much the equivalent of that one librarian who cannot give speeches, but he is very reasonable and you can have deep conversations with him. But we all know that this doesn't attract any people. This is why one of my more favorite Islamic Western thinkers is like what was his name? Timothy Scott, I believe. Timothy Scott. He actually leads the Cambridge Muslim Institute, which is more of a Maturidi and Islamic neo-traditionalist Sufi leaning, and pretty much he gets absolutely no intention, because if you actually go to his YouTube channel and look at his stuff, it's like calm speeches about things. He's very calm. He does book reviews and such. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have these Salafis and these Islamists screaming at the top of their lungs, "We need a jihad" and such. And objectively, it just attracts more people, and that's why it is kind of sad to see.
Yeah, that's understandable, I guess, from your perspective. I have some comments from the chat. If you're willing, some of these are questions and some of these are maybe criticisms. The first is from Koshmar. He says, Lavender, which school and madhab do you follow? I mean, I
Well,
think you mentioned some of it, but you can
yeah,
state
so
it clearly, I
basically,
guess.
the Hanafi school of thought, and in regards to, the this how to say, I'm pretty much a follower of Hanafi school of thought and the Maturidi creed, which is, more on the reasonable side.
Sure. Alva Ust says, read some Robert Spencer books if you want to know what Islam really is. He had some other comments against Islam as well.
Counter jihad slop.
Well, I was gonna say I looked him up, and I'm just gonna say,
I mean, again,
this is
literally,
an image of
I mean,
Robert Spencer, and based on this photo, I'm never reading a single word this man has ever written. That's all I'm gonna say.
I mean, again, he is one of those people, like, a lot of the things I've talked about here and like shed on the history and such of these things, like a lot of these counter jihad slop writers and such, they just refuse, or they literally do not know what these terms like Maturidi, Ashari, and Athari are. Like, they literally never heard of these things. They pretty much paint the entirety of Islamic theology in this like one paintbrush, and portraying that all Islamic theology is like this literalist Athari perspective, and that's that's actually that's actually kind of like the funny part, because that's what Salafism and these counter jihad slop people have in common, is that they both claim that Salafism is the objectively true Islam, and that all other sects are like the false thing. So pretty much they have a one struggle there. But in general, like that is basically what these counter jihad slop accounts lack, is that they actually, as I said, they don't really go into deep history and such. They pretty much paint the entirety of Islamic theology in this one brush, in like this literalist perspective, because that's basically the equivalent of like going to the Protestant Puritans and basically trying to argue that trying to argue that Catholics follow the exact same things as them, just because the Protestant Puritans claim themselves to be, the purest followers of Christ, just because they interpret the Bible and sola scriptura in the most literal way. Like, that's pretty much the equivalent of it.
Right. So I guess maybe this is a bit more pointed, but maybe you'd call this, slop as well. Ultra radical centrist in the chat says that Islam is ideological. The end point is Arabization of the whole world. I mean, you could say that this is a broad generalization, but to someone, let's say in Norway, how do you treat it? How do you, I guess, what's the Occam's razor here? Like, how do you know what you're dealing with?
Well, that is also another interesting point to bring up, is that the Salafis actually like unintentionally have, because of their very literalist point of view, and because they want to establish this uniform Islamic world, they actually argue for this exact stuff, is that everyone should dress up like Arabs and such. That's why, for example, I remember that there was a video of like students from Bosnia who graduated from pretty much Islamic school. They all have suits and ties at their graduation, and the Salafi guys come in like, why are they wearing Western clothing? Like, what is this? And again, it's actually unintentionally ties into their very literalist perspective, like having to go back to 7th century Arabia, because it doesn't just include practices, but it also includes clothing. And that's why they're also against this. That's why they also are not fond of like local Islamic cultures that formed organically, like, for example, what happened in Indonesia and Malaysia. They pretty much want to Arabify and pretty much turn everything Arabic, while a lot of the more Maturidis and the Asharis, because they don't share these same very literalist interpretations, they're like, no, you don't have to do that. God created us different for a specific reason. He does not want us to be a one uniform culture, because in the Quran, it is actually said that like God created different cultures and tribes so that others may get to know one another. So the argument is, if he seeks and wants like the Arabization of the entire world, then he wouldn't have made us different cultures. So they are much more in favor of like organic like Islamic cultures springing up rather than being completely Arabified, while the Salafis are against that due to their more literalist and go back to 7th century Arabia mindset unintentionally.
Right. We're coming up on close to the end of the show here, so I started a poll for those of you who are listening on or watching this on YouTube, and I asked the chat whether they would choose Dean or Dunya. Lavadar, Dean or Dunya?
Both.
I guess the idea is that you have to balance it, right? As far as I understand the concept. All right. I also have one more thing. This is kind of just for fun. I mean, if anyone have any more questions for Lavadar on this, that would be great. If you have anything more you want to say. Otherwise, we're going to start winding down a bit here. Ludwig Path, do you have any questions? Anything you want to comment on?
No, I think this was an interesting talk, and it would be interesting to. What was the book again that documented the sort of money trail from Saudi Arabia and some of these Gulf states?
Just a second. I can actually link them. I will actually link 2 very good books on that topic if you guys really want to, get more into the details here. So
sure,
the
I'll share
book,
them in the chat.
So the very first book I would actually suggest is actually kind of like the grounds of it. So it is the book Salafi Jihadism, The History of an Idea by Shiraz Maher. I will actually link it here. So I'll actually write it here so you can actually paste it in by Shiraz Maher. If you put it in the
private chat, I can share it. And
yeah. So this is the first one. And then the other one, which is, follows the whole Saudi Arabian money trail. Okay, let me see where, here it is. So Wahhabism and the World, Understanding Saudi Arabia's Global Influence on Islam by Peter Mandeville. So these are very, very excellent resources on this exact topic that, go a lot more into the nuances of these things as I have, presented in this podcast, but they go a lot hole deeper.
Sure. Nordanon in the chat says, I learned something today, which I guess is the highest praise that the show can get. So we appreciate that. I hope you all learned something today. I think that was very interesting to hear a different perspective. We can shit fling back and forth about Islam and the West, but it's always nice to have someone explain it from their point of view. Let's see here. One thing that I wanted to share that popped up while we were streaming was just this funny video from Oslo. For those of you who don't know, the police have for a long time, for as long as I can remember, employed horses as part of their policing in Oslo.
Based.
And very often it's, to corral drunk people. This is probably what you're seeing in this video here. As a police officer chasing some drunk, obstinate woman or something. Because, everyone has a plan until the, 700 kilo, 4-legged animal starts running around, and then people disperse usually. Cyber Ninja Zero says, one thing I would like to correct is the Wahhabism hypothesis is false. A look into the book Saudi Scent reveals that they are from all kinds of schools of thought. What do you think about that, Lavadar? Do you disagree?
Well, I guess if you want to give the most generous interpretation here is that Saudi Arabia in the recent times has definitely toned down a lot of its more, traditional and conservative elements. So, but I would still suggest like the majority of like a lot of these things emerged before that whole, quote unquote reform thing began, because Wahhabism itself is a form of Salafism that is much more structured to the Gulf countries, and it is of course again a much more traditional and literally interpretation of scripture. But I would say if you want to give the most generous like interpretation here, is that a lot of these things happened like much more early on when Saudi Arabia founded all this money, until like I'd say maybe maybe until the mid 2010s or something, but I have to look more into it. But I would say that's like the most generous interpretation you can give, is that in the recent years, you could maybe say that they have definitely toned down a bit, a lot of the ideas, particularly because of the reforms of Mohammed bin Salman.
All right. Jacob Woe asked, is this why ISIS terrorism ended? I'm not quite sure what specifically he's referring to. I'm not sure if you guys have...
No, not me either.
No. Okay. Well, I think that's as good time as any to end the stream. Thank you so much, Lavender, for joining us. This was a treat. Honestly, it was very, very interesting hearing all this. And we have talked a bit, and I think I would like to maybe have you back when we do our meme stream.
Of course, I'd be honored to join.
Great. So for those who might be in the chat and don't know who you are, where can they find you, and what do you do?
I'm basically a political and history YouTuber. You can find me on YouTube by just typing in my name, Lavender. I do pretty much all kinds of content and such. And on Twitter, you can also find me under the same at Lavender then _. And yeah, I'm almost at 50,000 subscribers. So please subscribe and send money so I can pay the rent.
That is the way, right? You have to do.
Of course. I mean, they gotta send the money. If you're really doing all this stuff, then emperor tribunary relationship.
Yeah. I really enjoyed your latest video, and as I said in our DMs, it's rare to find another Eric Ritter von Knoll Ladin enjoyer in these spaces. So so I really appreciate that. All right, check out his channel, check out his Twitter if you like it. Ludwig Path, anything you want to say before we leave?
No, thanks to everyone for tuning in, and happy 17th of May this weekend. For those,
yes, to all our Norwegian listeners, we wish you a great celebration this Saturday. I think that's it. Sorry, I cut you off there, Ludwig Path. Was there anything else?
No, I don't think you cut me off. It was probably my connection.
Okay. Okay, thank you for watching, thank you for listening, thank you for tuning in. If you are watching this after the show, please leave a like, maybe even a comment. That helps us a lot, and we will see you all next week. Bye-bye.